Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Mayor Jim Strickland tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We're going to start with questions about Elvis Presley Enterprises, the Grizzlies, the kind of dispute and disagreement that's going on with that. And I'm going to actually ask Bill to just do a quick setup for people who haven't followed this quite as much as the rest of us.
Graceland, Elvis Presley Enterprises has had a campus expansion underway for about the last 2 years, and that includes the guest house at Graceland. It includes Elvis Presley's Memphis, the entertainment complex across from the mansion. And now they have plans for a couple of other pieces, a convention center that would be at the back of the property west of Elvis Presley's Memphis, along with a 6,200 seat arena, which is where this gets kind of sticky because they have had a vote now from EDGE, the Economic Development Growth Engine Board, a city-county board that has the power to grant incentives for these kind of projects, that says, yeah, you can go ahead and do the convention center, you can go ahead and do the arena, contingent on a court ruling that says the arena does not violate the non-compete clause that the city and county have with the Memphis Grizzlies to run FedEx Forum for the city and the county.
All right. Mayor Strickland, there's been some heated words, and I will say that we'll invite the Elvis Presley people on another time to get their point of view. But what is your take on the situation, and are you not supportive of Elvis Presley Enterprises building that arena?
Well, first of all, I'm not all shook up. It's a little play on the song. There you go. Now, there's only one point of disagreement. All this noise, there's one point of disagreement, and that's whether any incentive, taxpayer money, should be used for the arena. So let's back up. When I was on the council, I supported tax incentives for the hotel. I supported tax incentives for the museum and the facilities across the street. I think they're great. I brag about it in my standard stump speech. I support their manufacturing facility. I have told them that for over a year. They ought to get tax incentives for that. That's the big job creator they talked about. Absolutely, they should get a pilot for that. But I think we ought to stop at giving additional incentives for any more entertainment facilities across the street from Graceland. They right now have a TIF that allows them to keep the increase in property taxes from the area. They get half of it. They want to go from half to 65%. That other 50%, they get 50% now, that other 50% goes to us and the city and county. It is literally money in our budget that pays for libraries, police officers, firefighters, community centers. To give them part of our 50% would come literally out of our budget into their pocket. And remember, this is money to a private person or business for a private enterprise, and they get to keep 100% of the profits. Incentives are meant to incentivize something, start it off. Well, I'm so proud of what we've started at Graceland. I think it's fantastic, but it's just, why get more incentives for that? And it violates the agreement with the FedEx Forum. The other week he was bragging about having the Lander Center, an arena like the Lander Center up there. That clearly violates the arrangement.
The Lander Center being a 6,000 seat arena down, 10,000, excuse me, seat arena down in DeSoto, Canada.
So it's both. The one point of disagreement, I disagree because it's a cash payment out of our operating fund, and because it violates the lease. And if that lease is violated, that's going to cost the city of Memphis millions of dollars.
With the lease with the Grizzlies
FedEx Forum, yes.
So were they to do it with private money and build an arena down there, would you even have any authority over that?
No, I wouldn't have any authority, and I would show up to the ribbon cutting. I think it's fantastic. I want them to build all they can privately.
How much pressure are you getting from the Grizzlies organization to fight them on this?
Hardly any.
Okay.
It's more of what I just think is right. They certainly brought up the issue. We originally talked to the Elvis Presley folks and said, hey, this sounds good, but you've got to clear this through the Grizzlies. We actually we're trying to negotiate a compromise on it last fall, and Elvis Presley Enterprises just filed suit, which kind of cut those negotiations. But all the talk of jobs and so forth, we support tax incentives for that manufacturing. So hopefully we'll continue to have talks. I actually like Joel Weinschenker. I think
who's the head of
Elvis Presley. I think he's done a good job down there, and we want to support it as much as we can. We want a strong Grizzlies and a strong Graceland.
Bill Drees.
One of the points that Joel Weinschenker has made in all of this is we want to up our draw, in effect, on the TIF from 50 to 65%. But he says Graceland wants to use that money to further pay off the debt from Elvis Presley's Memphis and Guest House at Graceland, and then Graceland would use the money that it's now putting into those two, would divert that money and use that to build the arena. Do you feel like that still is city and county funding going toward the arena?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I mean, that's just a financial arrangement on paper. It still would be incentivizing more entertainment at Graceland, entertainment facilities, and violate the lease. So it's the same thing. But we're all for that manufacturing facility. We've told them for over a year, file an application. They've not filed an application on that manufacturing facility yet. Please do it.
Does being in Chancery Court, does that make it more difficult to have talks, or is it possible to talk while that's going on?
Oh, it's very possible. He and I have been emailing each other the last week. Hopefully we'll set up a meeting soon. And I want him to succeed down there.
Well, segue a little bit to EDGE right now and incentives, speaking of pilots and changes and some criticisms of EDGE. But and we're going to talk later about the TDZ, about, for the fairgrounds and for the riverfront, all of which is thematically incentives. And I am sure there are people out there, because they email us and they'll comment on Twitter on our stories we do about incentives and the shows we do about incentives, that someone out there is saying this is what you get when a city plays this game with incentives, of incenting private business to do things. That cities should not be, Memphis should not be a part of that game. It's private enterprise taking advantage and getting kind of hooked on that sort of money, and that inevitably you're going to have these sort of conflicts given getting private business hooked on public money. Your response in the aggregate of the incentive game that you play.
Well, first of all, I got to say, if you want to avoid conflict in life, don't get married, don't have children, and don't interact with human beings. You'll avoid all the conflict you can and just stay on Facebook the whole day. Life isn't, conflict should not be a reason you don't do this thing. Every city, every state in the union does tax incentives. Only Memphis talks about unilaterally disarming themselves. That's the wrong thing to do. We've got momentum in this city. Let's start. I'm okay with incentivizing it to a degree, but once you incentivize something, you don't keep incentivizing it. You're not a business partner. Incentivize it, get it started. And there's so much misunderstanding about tax incentives, which we call pilots. Most pilots end up paying more property taxes than we were getting before, plus you get the jobs. So we say this over and over and over again. I think most people understand it. And all the incentives we give pale in comparison with the state of Mississippi gives.
Yeah.
And other states give. So we need to be pro-development, pro-incentives, because we get more in return than we give.
So going into the pilot program, Richard Smith, who's the current chair of the Chamber of Commerce right now, has been critical of EDGE, which manages the pilot program. That it hasn't been aggressive enough, it hasn't been more sales-oriented. He's had some criticism of leadership there. and that he points to, you've got the chamber doing one part, you've got EDGE doing one part, then you've got the city, you've got the county, but not an aggressive enough sales effort. And I'm not doing justice to what Richard has said, but that's a core part of his point on the part of EDGE. Your take on EDGE leadership right now?
Well, first of all, I want to say to have Richard Smith, the quality of him and the organization he represents, to have him involved is a home run for Memphis. I am so happy that he's engaged and involved in pushing us. But I also agree with his overall theory that I'll spread it out a little bit more. We as a team, that includes Jim Strickland, city government, the chamber, EDGE, everyone involved, we need to do better. And we need to be better at selling Memphis, and we need to bring more businesses here. So I like the fact that he's opened this up, and we're going to really examine what we're doing and make it better. So I welcome it. And
you have one, just technically for people, and I lose track of this too, you as city mayor have one vote on who leads EDGE, and you share that with the county mayor? Tell everyone again how that works, because it's...
The EDGE president, the full-time employee, and the chairman of their board, which is a volunteer position, are both jointly appointed by the city and county mayor. The board chairman is actually also approved by the city council and county commission. Now, one thing that's also kind of lost is that before I was mayor, EDGE signed an agreement with the chamber where it literally says the chamber will be the lead sales organization, not EDGE. The chamber goes out and sells, and then EDGE closes the deal. But I think that ought to be re-examined too.
Halfway through the show, one more issue on this, and Richard Smith, again we should say Richard is head of one of the, I've forgotten, one of the divisions of FedEx, the son of Fred Smith. He has also proposed changes to the way that minority women, minority-owned businesses, requirements that are in pilot agreements. He wanted to shift to more of a carrot-based approach, as he put it, versus a punitive approach. I mean, it's massively simplify this. The way it's structured now, if a company comes in and doesn't meet certain targets, it could potentially lose some of its pilot incentives, some of the incentive money. He would rather it be, look, the more minority and women-owned businesses that you bring into your new project, the more incentive you get over time. That was met with some hostility from some quarters. Your take on how that should be structured?
Well, as I understand it, first he's withdrawn that proposal.
And he has, yes. So, but it's been, we've talked about it a bunch. I think we've talked with you about it. We've talked with all that push-pull on that issue.
There are agents out there, commercial real estate agents and site selectors out there who are real key in where businesses go. Businesses hire these agents to look for cities where they go. Those agents that I've run into in my 2 years as mayor have pretty uniformly said that MWBE requirement is a prohibitive factor in coming to Memphis. They're the experts. I just have to listen to what they say. Richard's proposal didn't say for all pilots. It was in certain areas, for instance, corporate headquarters. And he picked that certain area because we haven't gotten a new corporate headquarters in Memphis from outside of Memphis maybe since International Paper, and that was 25 years ago or so. So he's saying, well, if we're not getting that area anyway, let's change up what we're doing and see, for a pilot period, let's see how we do. We were willing to have that conversation and look at it, but the proposal was withdrawn before we finished the evaluation. We need to do things differently. We're welcome this involvement. Let's lay it all out on the table and figure out the best way we can sell Memphis.
Bill Drees.
Mayor, if this returns in some altered version or some new iteration, and it still involves extending the term of a pilot for meeting minority business goals, does that endanger the idea of pilots rolling off and the revenue going to pre-K for the city?
That needs to be looked at. Because the way we funded our portion of universal pre-K was when a pilot ends, that revenue that was not paid by the company. It just taxes were reduced. When it goes up to the normal level, that money was going to be put in a pre-K fund. Yeah, any change to that we need to look to. Now, our proposal was not based on 100% of every pilot going in there. We reduced it because we knew some people wouldn't live up to their pilots, some would have to be extended. So that math would have to be taken into consideration.
Right, and it was based on pilots being an average of 8 years in duration, I believe.
That's what the average length is, yes. I do think that was part of the calculation.
Right. I think TDZ, the Tourism Development Zone, it is also something that's been in play here. And you had talked about going to the legislature in this current session that just ended, but there have been some complications with that.
Well, we have two potential TDZs. We have a current application on the downtown TDZ. And the only change there is where we can spend the money. Right now we can spend the TDZ money, which is extra money as I try to translate it. We get to keep the state portion of the sales tax. We can spend it on the pyramid, we can spend it on the convention center, and we can spend it in the Pinch area. What we're asking to do is, because we're receiving more money than we need in those three areas, is let us spend it along the riverfront. That application, I believe, is set to be heard in May or June by the State Commission, Building Commission, and we hope to get a positive result out of that. Then we have the Fairgrounds TDZ that we have an application pending from 6-7 years ago, but we're going to redo that and present that before the end of this year. And
there was some fear that elements in the legislature who want to take reprisals against the city for the movement of the Confederate monuments might hold up the TDZ application. Did you have any indication that was a target in the last session?
No, sir. So I don't feel that will be an issue.
What happened with the $250,000? Speaking of retribution, there was $250,000 that was removed from the House voted to remove it from the budget proposal. It was to go to bicentennial events and celebration for the city of Memphis next year. Was that a political game where that money wasn't there? They put it in to symbolically pull it back out, or was that really legitimate money that they withdrew?
I don't know all the details. What I do know is that Representative Karen Camper, who's from Memphis, wanted to put that $250 in there. We didn't know that she was doing that. We didn't know it until, frankly, it was taken out. So she might know more than I do, but I do know that she was an advocate for that.
But in the end, did you see any sort of retribution in terms of funding, in terms of project, in terms of any kind of bills that passed and were executed by the legislature that hurt Memphis?
We thought overall that Memphis fared well in the legislative session. We worked it really hard. We tried to communicate with legislative leaders, all from West Tennessee, even ones who strongly disagreed with our position on the monuments. We know that there were people who very much disagreed with our position, and then we just try to keep the lines of communication open. So we certainly weren't happy with every bill, but I don't think it was necessarily the result of the monuments.
Yeah, we'll switch gears a little bit to de-annexation, which was a legislative fight some years ago when there was going to be some forcible de-annexation by the state. The city and business leaders fended that off. But you have begun de-annexation procedures or process on certain areas. What areas and what's the process?
Well, actually, earlier this week we had a town hall meeting out in Eads to explain that we were going to de-annex them on our own. We were in the midst of that. It's been through 2 readings at council. There's a third one. So we had a town hall meeting to let them know that they can object to it if they want to under the law. We don't expect that to happen, but they have that right. So we are going to de-annex the Eads area, which runs basically from along the I-40 line all the way out to Fayette County, and then what we call the bottomlands of southwest Memphis that really no one lives in, but there's some land down there that people hunt on or that sort of thing. But we're going to de-annex those areas. And the Senate last year, not this year, the Senate last year passed a bill that we were totally okay with. Had the House passed that bill last year or even this year, we would already be in process of also de-annexing South Cordova, Southwind, Windike, and maybe a couple other areas. We're still committed to that.
But you need that bill passed by the House to do it.
Yeah, we really
why can you do the other? I guess I should ask it this way: why can you do the others without that bill?
Oh, we can do it, but we want to avoid the 1998 bill. Absolutely. So it's a compromise. If you because if we de-annex all these areas right now, there's no incentive for the legislature not to pass the 1998 bill. So we want to work out a deal that if we agree to de-annex these areas, they'll get us out from the 1998 bill, which was the Senate version of the bill.
And which would have opened the door for other areas to, in effect, petition.
This is kind of the frustrating part, because some of the people who live in these areas that wanted to be de-annexed were actually working against the Senate bill that passed, and had they passed that same bill in the House, the train would be moving to de-annex them. We got to get on the same page with these folks who live in these neighborhoods, because we both want the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Election thoughts. We'll come to local races, but one, and we chatted a little bit before the show about this, was the rejection of the mass transit bill in Nashville. And I don't mean for you to comment on the politics up in Nashville, the city of Nashville, but it did make me think about what next for cities in Tennessee who have mass transit needs. They had a huge $5 billion plan. I mean, Memphis 3.0 has made recommendations of some $30 million in increased capital and operating expenses and so on here, which is much more modest. The state is not particularly fond of mass transit plans in terms of funding them. What do you do about mass transit in Memphis when there's so much sentiment against the spending to build up the systems?
We have a transit problem in Memphis that's different than in Nashville. They have gridlock. We have a very poor public transportation system where we need another $30 or $40 million and on an annual basis to really run an adequate system. As y'all know, our budget increases every year by about only $10 million. And we have so many needs, from employees to more program for kids, we just can't do it. So we were very interested to see what happened in Nashville, because we could do a public referendum to raise either sales tax or the gas tax under the Improve Act to fund that, but the public would have to vote on it. My gut says that Nashville generally would be more willing to tax themselves than Memphians would, and it failed in Nashville.
Badly.
Badly.
Right? I mean, 60 to 30.
So I'm not sure people want to be taxed anymore. I think everyone who knows about the issue agrees that MATA needs more money, but I think we also agree that people don't want to tax themselves. So that's a real challenge we have, and I don't have the answer.
4 minutes left, Bill.
Speaking of taxes, you presented your budget recently to the City Council, your third budget. And one of the headlines out of that was a rollback of what is in effect the city's certified city property tax rate there. Why did you propose moving the tax rate back a year after the reappraisal?
Wow, this really gets in the weeds, and you understand this. It is technically a tax rate decrease, but I can't honestly say it's a tax cut, because appraisals went up and the tax rate has to come down, because under the law, the total receipts have to be even. So just because the assessments go up and some people are paying more taxes, the city under the law cannot benefit from that and get a windfall. So you have to lower the tax rate, and that's just what we did.
And the city got about $8 million in effect windfall, because there weren't as many appeals as the allowance provided for. So this evens that out.
Correct. So that we will get the same amount of revenue that we got before. So that's why I can't say it's a tax cut, even though it's a tax rate decrease.
And the council is not obligated to approve that. Although if they don't, there are some public notices that are made to tell people, hey, they made more money than they should have.
They're only obligated under the law to actually take a separate vote to move it down to the 319 level, which is I'm proposing, and they would have to take a separate vote to raise it from there. Just like they're not obligated to accept any year the tax rate that I'm proposing.
With just 2 minutes left, you kind of move through some things that we could do whole shows on. One is with the county mayor's race was settled. The Republican Democrat were settled this week. Will you endorse? Will you campaign? Will you stay out of that race?
I will stay out of all those partisan county races because just based on my conversations with former mayors, you have to work with whomever is elected. They're both friends of mine, and let the voters decide who they want. I don't think people elected me to make endorsements.
Since it's a month now probably, but this is the first time we've had you on since Memphis was not selected to go advance in the Amazon HQ2 proposal. We talked about this at a ULI summit recently, but any regrets on how that proposal was done? Any sense? I mean, I heard from a very small number of people, a handful of people, we shouldn't have gone into a pitch for a headquarters we had virtually no chance of getting. Now it just makes people feel defeated. Anything you learned from that
I totally
process?
disagree with that. Totally disagree. I mean, you can't make the shots that you don't take. So you got to try your best. And we actually benefited from the process because under Mayor Luttrell's leadership, every city in the county and every chamber in the county got together and worked together. When I left one of the meetings at Shelby Farms, one of the suburban chamber leaders walked out with me, and he said in his 10 years on the job, he's never seen them all get together. So now we're working together. We have all the material we need to sell otherwise, and I don't accept that defeatist attitude. We all got to work together and make a pitch every chance we get.
All right, we will leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Join us again next week. Thanks.